can't be a member of the BNP unless you're white. So we told them, you're not having a meeting in our town then. You're having no meetings in our town. And the BNP was non-existent from this point. Yeah. So non-existent. So 4 years later is when I formed the English Defence League. And from the offset, we were welcome to every colour, every race, everybody. So I formed the English Defence League in 2009. I want to get onto the far right label because this is provable as well. The media called it far right. From the start, we had a Sikh leader, Gurmit Singh. Okay, great lad. We done more to educate the British public and the white, predominantly white working class community of what Sikhs have given, what other minorities have given into the UK. And the reason being, I'm from Luton Town, so the majority of my friends aren't white. So the ethos of the English Defence League started with my mindset. We had a Sikh division, a Hindu division, we had a lesbian and gay division. We had a Jewish division. We had divisions from every community. Doesn't sound very far right. Now, let's not allow the media to decide whether an organisation is far right. There's a national extremism unit within the Metropolitan Police Force, and it's their job to define groups like the English Defence League and the BNP. The BNP were categorised as extreme far right. The English Defence League, the entire time I led it, centrist organisation. So because the media say it once and then say it 100 times and then it gets regurgitated by the media and politicians and all alike, it was far right, it was far right. It was never far right. And it was always judged by the national extremism unit of the Metropolitan Police Force, who are professionals and whose job it is to do this and look at groups as to what constitutes actually far right, is that Muslims should enter dialogue. This was their advice, which the officer got absolutely hammered for. But their advice was the English Defence League is a centrist organisation and Muslims should enter dialogue with them. People should listen to them. That was the entirety of the time I led the English Defence League. So I left the English Defence League in 2014-15. So your viewers understand what it was. We were an organisation that brought to the forefront issues which government, media, politicians didn't want to have discussed. They were issues that bring about the failures of open border mass immigration, the effect it has on society, and the reality of living in a town that's been that they've flooded with people of all different cultures. So a group that come about to highlight and bring to the forefront. And remember, grooming, which we spoke about, no one even knew, there was no word grooming. It's a pretty word they give it. There was no word grooming. No one knew of these rape gangs. In fact, everyone was attacked or we were demonised for trying to talk about them. Now, years on, everyone accepts they were a reality, as were many of the problems we spoke about are now accepted as legitimate and accepted as truthful, which is why videos I made years ago have aged well for me and not well for my opposition. It's why people are listening to me now and realising that they lie. It's why it puts them in a bad position and not me. I can sit here and say, well, I told you the truth. And the public who have been crying out for the truth, who are angered, who are scared, at a time like this, when our culture is disappearing, when our country's being flooded, they're looking back over 10, 15 years and they're saying, well, he was telling us the truth. He wasn't lying. And against all the flack and all the attacks and all the imprisonment, they still maintain telling the truth. And that truth isn't far right. It's not even extreme. It's the truth.
Okay, well, so a couple of things there. So you said, for example, you're objecting to the labeling of far right. You make the claim that many of your friends aren't Caucasian or aren't white, a very difficult thing to define. You talk about the English Defence League bringing in Sikhs and Jews and people from all sorts of different ethnic groups, but there's also an anti-mass immigration through story in your discussions. And so how do you distinguish between the kind of immigration that has brought you the people that you have had friendships with in Luton and what is it? Is it the grooming gangs that's drawing the distinction? Like, what is it that you're trying to tell people about immigration, given that you also have friends from all sorts of different ethnic groups and races? And you're also denying any allegations of racism or even ethnic prejudice for that matter. And partly you point to the fact that your English Defence League had different groups of people in it, but also your own friendships. So what makes you convinced that you're not a far right figure? And what is it specifically about immigration that you're trying to object to?
I'm not denying it. I'm actually hated by the far right. I'm despised as a race traitor. As I've made comments, so Angela Merkel, David Cameron, these were all the leaders at the time of the English Defence League. They all come out and said multiculturalism's failed. I went on record as saying, actually, you're all cowards, yeah? Because what's failed, if we want to admit what's failed, Sikhism hasn't failed to integrate or assimilate into British society. The Jews haven't failed. St. Lucians haven't failed. Everyone else, they haven't failed. You are taking a problem what's failed, and I just speak about my experience from growing up in Luton. And again, I'll set the record straight. Not every Muslim, okay? I'm not saying every Muslim. Some of the best people I've met growing up are Muslim. Some of the people I love and still have relationships are Muslim. And I challenge any journalist, come to Luton and find me Muslims with non-Muslims. And every time when I was leading the English Defence League and a journalist would come and interview me, I said, you walk through the town and you try and find me Muslims with non-Muslims. You won't find them. You'll have the Muslims and the non-Muslims. Now, we didn't create that. We can't be, on our school, I speak about when I grew up, it was the Muslim playground and the non-Muslim playground. So I grew up experiencing this. I experienced the separation and the segregation, the zero assimilation. And I knew something was very, very different. And until, I think in 2011, I was spending 22 weeks of solitary confinement. And I challenge again, anyone listening to do this. Take the Quran. I was sent in the Quran by a Muslim outreach organisation trying to convert me. So I took the Quran and thought, right, let's look at this. And I opened it and I challenge any of you to do this. And every time it says, do not be friends with Christians or Jews, just write the verse number. You will have pages and pages of verse numbers. So then what you have is children being brought up. And if I brought my children up and all of us as white people brought our children up to do not be friends with black children, we would see hostility and violence. But